this thing called? Not a chakra.
Nunchucks?
No.
The whippy thing.
The whippy thing.
The chalk. Fuck.
The woo-woo-woo.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, that throwing.
There's a name for it. It's like it's not a chakra, but it's
Looks like a boomerang.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash Hominis Nocturna Frost.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all that information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live all week long, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Gene, I'm very excited tonight. We're going to take this podcast to the darker side of Shat and do something about the undead. I was looking back and I could not believe it was September of 2016 when we, much like the Frog Brothers, we had to go out there and find somebody who knew everything about vampires, and we summoned Gene Lyons to the podcast. And Gene, I think we're going to need you tonight.
You know, I feel a lot of undue pressure whenever we do a vampire movie, being the vampire expert. And as Ash came on and has done, 100 movies with us now,
yes, yep.
I feel like we're now the vampire duo. We are the new Frog Brothers. And Big D, what was most exciting for me tonight is that Lost Boys, I was like, we might lose Big D on the fact that they're just some bad boys in the 80s. And then with the Interview with the Vampire, it might be a little too homosexual for him. But this time, we got vampires and kick-ass, fuck yeah, over-the-top action. I feel like we're finally going to get you on board with the vampire movie.
I don't want to spoil anything, but I think we're off to a good start here. And that's why I'm excited when Steve wanted us to go back to 1998 and review the horror film based on a Marvel comic book superhero, Blade. And Steve this week, instead of writing in an email, I guess he kind of lost track of time, so he sent us a voicemail, which I'll play for you now.
Hey, it's Half Steve. So I didn't realize Blade was just about to be recorded tonight, and I didn't email. I don't know if I'll have time to email, so I'm just calling so you have something. Yeah, Blade, great movie. I think I originally commissioned it for Gene, so there you go, Gene. But without Blade, there would be no MCU. This movie saved Marvel's ass. They were nearly bankrupt, so if you're a fan of the MCU like I am, you can thank this movie, because without it, there is no Marvel. So enjoy the movie. From what I remember, it is pretty fucking good. It should have a decent wipe score. I have commissioned 2 of the best wipe scores in Wayne's World and Alien. So hopefully this is right up there with those 2. You guys have a great day and can't wait to listen to this episode whenever it comes out. Bye.
Hold on, isn't Steve cherry picking a bit? Hasn't he also done a couple bombs?
Yes.
He did Hook. Didn't he do Hook? Or was
He
that somebody
did.
else? Oh, that's what I thought.
He also did Stargate and claimed that it was a zero wipe movie. So
It's a good one, though. Stargate was good, but Hook was a pile of shit.
I should make a graph of like Steve's affect on his voicemails from start to finish, where in the early days it's like, hey, Shat crew, Hot Sauce Steve here. And now it's like, hey, you,
I don't think I'll have time to email you, so I'm going to call you while I'm driving to the local 7-Eleven.
I commissioned this one for Gene when I liked him. Blade is a 1998 horror film based on the Marvel Comics superhero of the same name. The film stars Wesley Snipes as the titular character with Stephen Dorff and Chris Christopherson in supporting roles. In the film, Blade is a vampire, a human with vampire strengths but not their weaknesses, who together with his mentor, Abraham Whistler, and hematologist Karen Jensen, fights against vampires, namely the exceptionally vicious Deacon Frost. Released on August 21st, 1998, Blade was a commercial success, grossing $70 million at the box office and $131 million worldwide. It was followed by 2 sequels, Blade 2 and Blade Trinity. Blade was a dark superhero film for its time, and its success set the stage for further Marvel film adaptations. So Big D, Ash, we always ask where we were and what our memories are of the movie we're covering. Tonight, it's Blade. Big D, we'll start with you.
I often hate it when I can't remember where I watched the movie. This movie, thankfully, is not the case. I saw this in AMC 24 Pleasure Island. I was interning at Disney. It's basically slave labor. They call it the college program. Amazing. I don't know that it exists in the same setup the way it did when I was there, but it was like a nonstop party. Camouflaged as an internship, and it was great. And we would hide boxes of wine in my backpack. You'd take them out, and you'd have the bladder. You could hide them in the line of the backpack, and we would go see a day's worth of movies. We would go in there, and I remember on this day, we would get a large popcorn, and we kept refilling it. We saw a couple movies. We saw Something About Mary. Then we saw Blade, and we saw Saving Private Ryan. It was a long day of drinking wine, eating popcorn, and watching movies. But I would do anything today to go back there for one more of those days.
Shit, you're lucky you did it in that order. Can you imagine if you started off with Saving Private Ryan? Kind of put a damper on the rest of things.
A one movie day instead of a triple feature.
As a 90s goth, this movie was everything to me because the clubs look like the clubs that I went to. The music was music that I listened to. I finally got to see a comic book movie that wasn't Superman or Batman doing like cartoony shit. Like I liked Superman, I liked Batman, but it didn't occur to me that we could get this kind of a comic book movie, that this was even possible. So it was eye-opening. It was enjoyable. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I don't really remember a time that I feel like I didn't know about Blade in these movies, because I loved this movie from the very first time I saw it. I was a freshman in high school when this came out, and I was just really starting to find like my people. And so watching it, like the clothes, the clubs, the music, I felt like I was seeing so much of my current world and like the world I was growing up into. I had decided like that this was like what I wanted to be, right? And so I was really stoked to be like, oh my God, like I'm going to be an adult like that one day. And not like the boring ass adults that I had around me or as my teachers. And vampires, like, total favorite of mine when it comes to vampire lore is this one. I love me some Children of the Night, and Blade vamps are totally different than any other vamps that we've looked at so far. So those people who were like, Gene and Ash were all like loving about the Interview with the Vampire and Rice vampires. Like these are like straightforward, badass, like cool club kid vampires. So there's going to be no romanticizing the vamps tonight.
Straight fang banging.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hit that trailer.
You better wake up. The world you live in is just a sugar-coated topping. There is another world beneath it. The real world.
For thousands of years, they have existed among us.
You keep your eyes open. They're everywhere. Chances are you've seen them yourself and didn't know it.
A secret nation.
Our livelihood depends on our ability to blend in.
With a lust for power.
We should be ruling the humans. These people are our food.
They've got their claws into everything. Politics, finance, real estate.
There's a war going on out there. He makes the weapons. I use them.
Now, one will lead them to conquer mankind.
Tonight, the age of man comes to an end.
We're gonna be gods.
And one will try to stop him dead.
There are worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me.
Half human.
Blade's mother was attacked by a vampire while she was pregnant.
Half immortal.
You got the best of both worlds. All our strengths, none of our weaknesses.
He is their greatest fear and our only hope.
It's open season on all vampires.
Wesley Snipes, Stephen Dorff.
You're one of them, aren't you?
No, I'm something else.
Blade.
In 1967, a pregnant woman is attacked by a vampire. Doctors save her baby, but the woman dies from an unknown infection. 30 years later, the child has become the vampire hunter Blade. Blade raids a club owned by the vampire Deacon Frost. Police take one of the vampires to the hospital, where he kills Dr. Curtis Webb and feeds on hematologist Karen Jensen. Blade takes Karen to a safe house where she is treated by his old friend Abraham Whistler. As Karen is now marked by the bite of a vampire, both he and Blade tell her to leave the city.
So I was not a comic book reader. I was not big into Marvel or DC really before, the last couple of years, what's become big in the movies. So I came into this blind, and I was shocked. This has to be the shortest origin story ever. It took about 8 seconds. Mom comes in. Oh, she's bitten. She's in the hospital. Oh, mom's dead. Baby's born. Minimum required. That's all they showed us. Child survived. And I want to thank Blade for respecting our time the way that Silverado did not.
Big D, be grateful you didn't get Blade's comic book origin story, like the Marvel origin story. It goes all the way back to London in 1929 and secret societies. And then he goes to the US and he goes back to London. And then he has a run-in with Morbius, a living vampire who bites him, who gives him additional abilities. This is a way better origin story. Plus it involves Detroit. I'm 100% with you. Full speed ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's much better for Frost to be somebody who bit his mom rather than in the comics where he's playing that he's, a doctor and she comes in with labor complications, and it's a much different story than we get here. But I will say that one of the things that I think this movie does well is, like you said, they're not wasting time, because we just did Silverado. And I don't know if there's been a movie that's wasted more time than Silverado. And then we get this one. And a lot of movies that are lesser, that are setting up, kind of like the origin movies, they spend so much time laying the ground rules. And that happens often with vampire movies. There's almost like a montage where you need a whiteboard, explaining what all the rules of the vamps are. And we don't get that here. You get these things really, really fast in this movie. So you find out that silver snake sunlight can kill them, but nothing else. And you also find out that the vamps aren't immortal, that they just kind of age slower and much slower than we do, but they're not immortal. While it's not my favorite iteration of vampires, because I do love Anne Rice more than any others, I think the way that they share out this law works, because it's we're Karen. We're learning from Karen as we go. We are learning with every single scene what it is that these vamps do and what Blade does. And it just works to keep that pace clipped, because this one moved along. I forgot how quick this movie moves.
And maybe it's just because I'm on the back half of my life expectancy, but this rubbed me the wrong way. I really didn't like the idea of vampires who get weaker as they age. I prefer the classic, Anne Rice, older vampires or stronger vampires approach, which is what we get in most movies. It makes you feel good about aging. So seeing Frost, spoiler alert, take out Dragonetti, the head vampire, so easily, it was a bummer. He's just out there. He's oh no, I guess I die now. And they pull his teeth out. He puts up no fight at all. I like old school, big, bad, old vampires, got crazy ass magic nobody's seen before. That's one thing about this movie I missed.
But as the regular vampire watcher, I thought it was a nice change to see vampires that are afraid. In most of the movies, the vampires are the hunters. There's very few times that they're actually fearful, that they're running around. So to watch these vampires flip it from being the ultimate apex predator to being prey themselves was a nice change for me.
Well, the other thing that this movie kind of tackles that a lot of vampire movies don't is this idea of like the corporate vampire. And it makes sense because if vamps are immortal or aging super slow, so they seem immortal, then pretty much they'd run everything because they would be all old money and they would have property and they would be like the wealthiest people that exist. And so I do like that they go down this road here, but I do think this is one of the places that the movies age the most because it's a little shaky. You got those cheesy ass wing leather chairs. You got that dark blue cinematography. The suits they're wearing look cheap as fuck. And I think it's kind of boring. And I don't think vampires should be boring. I'm not saying that I like this version of vampires, but the True Blood series, they kind of go into this territory too. And I think they do a much better job of building on this because they still look sleek. Like they look like they're like head bitch in charge. And here they just kind of look like people that are like weren't cool enough to make it on Wall Street and had a bad coke habit. So they went and got like a dark room somewhere.
I'm so embarrassed in my notes right now because I literally wrote down vampires look cool and rich.
Yes.
Would you rather have them be like the Volturi from Twilight and just like have little doilies and look down on everyone?
No, but I want them to wear like a tailored suit. Like the suit that like Dragonetti's wearing looks like a fucking box. It looks terrible. Like, you know, if you've been alive for 500 years, get a fucking tailor, man.
Yeah, he's German.
Yeah, you know.
Sorry, Germans.
I was going to say that around this time, everybody had the big suits, you know, the shoulder pads. But you're right. The older vampires should be looking more sleek, and the young ones could kind of look like they're a little schluppy. But I have something here I want to talk about. Now, this comes from no research. I looked and could not find anything to back up my theory, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to throw it out there, okay? Blade came out while The Matrix was still filming. And I have a feeling that in some way it had a direct effect on The Matrix. Watching it now, I'm shocked at how much The Matrix looks suspiciously like this movie. The fighting scenes and style, the action pieces set to techno. I mean, Gene and I were rocking out before we recorded to the New Order remix. You hear this and you see Tracy Lords coming in, the sprinklers shooting down blood. It made sense. The fights come out. And in The Matrix, we had some propeller head. Okay, same vibe. I'm getting the same thoughts. Okay, so now the only thing that The Matrix did differently was that rotating camera where they would shoot the scene around. But in this one, some of The Matrix's most iconic scenes are done before it. The scene in The Matrix that everybody remembers is where Neo is leaning back. He's kind of like waving his arms, like he's catching his balance. And the shots come going by really slow. That is almost an exact copy of when Frost is in the park and Blade is shooting at him. It looks identical. There's a scene also where Blade is infiltrating the vampire archives. The guards they're dressed in black like the SWAT team, and they're hiding behind the pillars and shooting and moving. That's the Matrix scene before they get into that office building to free Morpheus. This can't be a simple coincidence.
Big D, welcome to the late 90s. This influence all comes from that late 90s club scene that was massive at the time. You know, I think about now, like my cousins, they go to what they think are raves. Like go to a rave. That's not a rave. You're going to a party at an established nightclub where people are all dressed in like fucking normcore. It's lame. The late 90s, I'm going to get up on my old man soapbox here. It was the pinnacle of the club scene. And that pump panel remix of New Order's Confusion, the outfits, the unabashedly flashy style, I think this was just the zeitgeist of the hip kids, the club kids in 1998. Everything was going to look like that.
It really starts in the mid 90s in film, right? Like you've got what everybody thinks is like the ultimate movie of like The Crow in 94. And then you got a little bit of it in Spawn in 97. You got Hackers. I mean, they look identical to what exists here. You've got this, and it goes all the way into almost like 2003 with Underworld, which is a total ripoff of style from this movie, right? And lesser vamps because werewolves suck. But that being said, it's just the look that everybody had. And you could take any of those characters from any of these films and like insert them in any of the other films with the same soundtrack, with the same cinematography, with the same look. I mean, I kind of forget that like Angelina Jolie and like that plastic blue dress from the End of Hackers doesn't like randomly wind up in Blade. And that's not an insult to Angelina Jolie and Hackers. Somebody commission it because it's a fucking great movie.
There's nothing you could insult about Angelina Jolie and hackers. We talk a lot about the ways we've changed over the years and how those changes influence our view of the movies we love growing up, right? When we watch, Spaceballs at 41, it might be different than when you watched it at 20. I was shocked at how little my impression of Blade's rave scene has changed since I first saw it at 18. Granted, this was the first time I found myself asking, how the hell did he get into this underground club fully armed without anybody noticing? And I could have sworn that someone in the movie yells bloodbath before the sprinklers come on instead of it just being a banner. Yep. I've been misquoting it this whole time. But other than that, I remembered this scene, this opening fight scene, frame for frame. I was still horny for the vampire girls. I still wanted to be on that dance floor. And I still felt so vindicated when that Chad, who just wanted to bang a freaky chick, found out that Tracy Lords was a lot freakier than he had anticipated. I was all in for this scene, man.
I think when I think back about this time, it really was a time period where I was becoming a woman and a grown up, because this came out in August of 98. And I went to go see this with my dad, spoiler, because I saw everything with my dad in this time period. And I remember he was so freaked out by this opening scene because I think he realized how turned on I was by it, right?
Yes.
And March 25th of 99 was my first big Marilyn Manson show, UNO Lakefront Arena in New Orleans. We had floor seats. We got covered in blood, fake blood, this scene. And I came home looking like that. And I remember my dad seeing me when I walked in the door, and he was just like, oh, Blade. He made the connection between that, because my dad is not an underground person. He's not an alternative person. This was his only entry and foray into that. And he was so freaked out by the next 8 years of my life. And my mom used to go to church, and I was on the prayer list for the way that I dressed and the music I listened to. And I feel a lot of it is encapsulated by what you see here. And at 38, I don't know about Eugene, but I'm sitting here at 38 and I'm watching it. And I'm fuck, yeah, I could still fit in there. Let's go. I got some outfits in my closet still. Let me get dressed. I can fucking hang. It looks like a good time.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, I went to Addiction, and it was the same people from 1998 still at the club. Everyone's gained a little bit of weight.
I think the vampires, they're a very tolerant culture. They run the gamut. Not everybody's beautiful. You've got some uglier people, some older people, some heavier people, some bald people. They seem to be accepting.
And I think that extends to goth culture. My God.
Yeah.
I've seen Jacob's Ladder levels of what the fuck am I looking at the club, and I'm okay with it. I love it.
That's why, I don't know if you guys watch Righteous Gemstones, but that's why I love that scene in season 1 where he goes to the goth club and that pool with the straw with his dick out, and everybody's just standing around, and it's no big fucking deal. Come on, Big D. Come join our world.
I'm thinking of it. Just like this movie has rekindled my thirst, I think it would be fun one day to go out to LA, maybe, Gene, and goth me up for a night. I would do it. I would go full goth.
No, you can't. We can't goth you up.
I was what does that even mean? Goth you up?
I'm saying you have to make me look. You have to make me look so
it's
that
not
I wouldn't.
A costume, though.
Isn't it really though?
No, it's a way of life. It's a life principle.
Are you going to work in goth? If not, it's not a life choice.
No, it's not about if I'm going to work in goth. It's about if I'm going to the club and what I would wear to work, which is yes. That's what I wear. But Big D, the cool thing is at your age, you're at the Trent Reznor age, where all true goth has to do is do what you're doing right now. Just wear a black t-shirt and have a short haircut. You look gother than anybody on the podcast right now.
I'm in. I like it. Let's do it.
Goth you up.
I have an eyeliner or something. I didn't know.
Oh my God.
Back in college, there was a woman who wanted to go goth clubbing with me, and I really did not want her to go with me. She was one of the residents at my residence hall, and I was an RA. And she went out and paid someone to paint her up with latex on her body, and then showed up at my door and said, we should go out. I couldn't say no because she went through all that effort, but also I had to go out, as you can imagine, the shame of having to go to the club and have all your friends at the club go, who the fuck is that chick? Why is she painted in latex and not wearing any clothing?
She got gothed up.
So Big D, if you want us to paint you up in latex.
No, I guess I'm happy I'll be accepted the way I am.
You look perfect.
Okay, great.
Well, meanwhile, at a meeting of the Council of Pureblood Vampire Elders, Frost is rebuked for trying to incite a war between vampires and humans. As Frost and his kind are not natural-born vampires, they are considered socially inferior. In response, Frost has one of the elders executed and strips the others of their authority. Returning to her apartment, Karen is attacked by police officer Krieger, who is a familiar, a human loyal to vampires. Blade subdues Krieger and uses information from him to locate an archive that contains pages from the vampire Bible. He comes upon Pearl, a morbidly obese vampire, and tortures him with a UV light into revealing that Deacon wants to command a ritual where he would use 12 pureblood vampires to awaken the blood god La Magra, and Blade's blood is the key.
So Blade almost came out 24 years ago, and I cannot overstate how beautiful the art design in this film is. The movie's props, the costumes, the production design, it makes everything look clean, cool, and most importantly, functional. All of Blade's gadgets and the hideout, it all looks well thought out. His 68 Charger, it looks very much like the brand new Batmobile. It's very bare bones, very rugged, very clean. Blade's outfit, that black leather trench coat, the tactical vest, his trousers, it looks even cool today. You could go out like that and nobody would look at you weirdly. It's highly functional. All of his gear is laid out to hide it. He can reach it, the silver spikes, the auto injectors. He's got plate armor in the chest that isn't too visible. And the way that he incorporates the sword in the back of the trench coat and the way it goes down and kind of hides it. From the moment that we meet him as the Daywalker in the rave, when all the blood's going on, that one guy stops at his feet. He is clean. The leather, it's amazing. Everything is functional without sacrificing that superhero cool look in a non-cartoonish way.
And what made it fun is, much like Batman, Blade's arsenal gives the filmmakers this creativity. It like keeps us excited to see what he'll use next and how he'll use it. Although they don't get too much into the Marvel lore with Blade, his appearance is a tiny nod to his comic book history, because in the Marvel books, he incorporates items to honor heroes who fought beside him. Like his sunglasses that he always wears. He met Jamal Afari, who was like posing as a jazz musician, and he wore sunglasses. And so after parting from him, Blade wears those sunglasses to honor Jamal. But at the same time, like you said, Big D, still functional.
Well, and he's got like the awesome tats. Like, I mean, he just looks like a slick motherfucker and looks unlike any other vampire, because he's half vampire, right? And he doesn't look like any other vampire that we've seen, but yet still has that sleekness and like that quick movement about him, which I was surprised by, because Wesley Snipes is a big dude. So him moving quick has got to be really, really difficult. And I think the coolest prop that he has is the fact that his sword, when you hold it and you're not him, when it explodes out, like what a smart feature to have. Because if somebody takes your sword, their hand blows off. So everything, including like the little booby traps, serve a purpose that just make a lot of sense for a smart guy and Whistler who've been fighting them their entire lives, that they would come up with over time.
And even like you just said, Ash, it made me think of, do you remember the Michael Keaton Batman? He couldn't turn his head in the cowl. Wesley Snipes is still fluid and moves with incredible quickness, even though that outfit, it doesn't restrict him. It's amazing.
Which is not easy to do in the type of coat he's got on. Like, that shit could get caught on a lot of things really easily, and it doesn't. And he looks badass. Like, I'd hit him up at the club. He looks good.
But with all that gear Blade carries, you think he would carry like a syringe of garlic juice. Because with all the vampires he's slaying, he's bound to run into people who've been bitten, like Karen. He has to take Karen all the way back to the Blade lair, or whatever it's called, Whistler HQ. And all Whistler needs to help her fight off vampirism is like a little swish of garlic injected into her neck. It seems like a handy thing to have on you at all times. If you're going to be carrying a gun, the sword, the explosives, the chakram, like all that stuff, you would think, I don't know, one syringe of garlic juice is all you need.
But I think he makes it clear that he's not in the business of saving people, that he normally never brings them back. But I don't know why he didn't just kill her.
She's black and she's hot.
That could be some motivation. You know, it's hard to find a vampire. No, I don't want to say that. Yeah, I was just saying, it's got to be hard to find an attractive black vampire that he has a chance to maybe connect with. She's also a hematologist. Whatever. Okay, I'm not judging anybody, but I think there's an issue here with the what? We can cut it. I'm sorry, I've just not been exposed to many African-American vampires that are that attractive.
I mean, you imply that you've been exposed to so many that are ugly?
No, I haven't been exposed to any, except for his mom.
Who's hot?
There's an issue here with Frost's master plan. He's going to raise the blood god. He's going to give all the vampires the ability to walk in the day. This would allow the vampires to take their place at the top of the food chain. I think Frost says, the age of man is over. So Gene, I got to ask you here. If the vampires do take over the world, they eliminate the humans, wouldn't that be like bad because they don't have a food source anymore? Wouldn't the world of only vampires, wouldn't they just simply die out because of lack of food?
I mean, vampire literature, and I'm sure Ash can speak to this too, has a long-standing suggestion that vampires see us as cattle. So I would assume that they would just farm humans, but that's a terrible food source because like humans, there's a reason other than the fact that it'd be cannibalism that we don't eat humans. One, we mature way too slowly. If you look at most animals, they mature very quickly. Humans take fucking forever to reach adulthood. We have absurdly tiny litters. It's impractical to have like, oh, she's pregnant and in 9 months she'll have one child. Great. And simply drinking bottled blood is so boring. What vampire would want to do it? No vampire wants to go to the store and buy blood. It's much more fun to kill things. So you'd have to have some sort of like preserves where you'd have humans running around in the woods or something. Maybe they haven't thought it through.
Or they could just like create like a synthetic that tastes like human blood because they've been around for all of eternity and can figure that out. Or they can feed on lions and panthers and tigers and all the other things that exist. Puppies, cats.
Hold on. So why wouldn't they have invented this blood prototype or blood replacement in all of the time?
That's like legitimately the whole plot of True Blood is that they create a synthetic blood called True Blood.
Okay, well, that needs to come into this world. But Gene, we talked earlier about like the vampire economy. In this world you're describing, we're going to have vampire farmers. What are they going to do? How are they going to like herd the humans? It's not cool being a farmer. You're going to want to go out and party and bite people.
I think you're kind of like misunderstanding Frost here, though, because he says the age of man comes to an end. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all of men are gone. You've got that Daybreakers movie that Ethan Hawke is in that kind of explore this, where like the vamps have come to the true top of the food chain and have come out about it. Because they talk a big game like, we're the top of the food chain, we're the top of the food chain. But they also stay in hiding so they can stay at the top of the food chain. And so maybe it's something like that more that, they actually go and kill all the men and take over the economy and, make men go hide in the sewers or wherever men would hide in that circumstance.
Big D, you mentioned the vampire economy. It is a little confusing because when Blade's taking Karen to find Pearl, he's like pointing out who's a vampire and who's not, right? They're at the corner outside the club. And he's like, okay, those door guys, those are vampires. That valet, vampire. That sex worker on the corner, she's a vampire. I feel like if you're a creature who is immortal or ages very slowly and you have to feed on people, there are other jobs that are both more beneficial and less burdensome than like streetwalker or valet. Like, what's the point of being a vampire if you got to work a 9 to 5? It doesn't make any sense.
No.
I don't disagree. And I think it's interesting how different movies like treat this because here they work human jobs that are like, more menial jobs. They have almost a hierarchy amongst themselves, where as you get a series like Discovery of Witches, which I think is a really good series, and in that vampire lore, like they're all academics, which I feel like is what I would want rather than like the money grubbing. They all go out and become professors and doctors and become very learned. Of course, they're not as badass as some of the vampires in this movie, but that would make more sense to me because I don't want to be like a waitress, which is fine if you are a waitress. That's a fine thing. But like if I'm immortal, I don't want to wait tables.
No.
For eternity.
You'd think that they'd almost be a little more socialist in their leanings, right? Like you'd have very affluent vampires who are basically landlords, and then they just are like, hey, other vampires, since we're all vampires and we have to do shit secretly, like, let's just hang out. Deacon's got the right idea, right? Deacon just throws parties and everybody just comes and hangs out. That's cool.
Yeah, and they share the bodies.
Yes, there should be a vampire living wage. The old vampires have invested the money and they support the lower vampires so they don't even have to work.
And that encourages people to not be turning more mortals into vampires because the more vampires there are, the less of a cut you get, right? From an economic standpoint, you want as few vampires as possible keep it elite.
But that's what you got here, though. Like the people that are like the valets and sex working out there are the ones who are made into vampires, not the ones who were born vampires, which I do wish we had found out about that. Because like, how are vampires born from other vampires? I want to know that.
I actually looked into that one, and in some vampire worlds, including this one, it's just actually two vampires having a baby.
Huh.
It's not as exciting as I thought it would be. I thought like they spawned from some demon hole or something like that, which...
So just sex.
Cool. Yeah. Apparently these vampires can have sex, so that's great.
Yeah, good for them. Up until this point, I've absolutely loved this movie, but I have a question. Was Pearl needed? Because I sometimes wonder what people, like what goes through their head when they're building out a movie, when they're like storyboarding it. And then I also wonder after that process how some ideas that are really bad make it on screen. And I think Pearl is a perfect example of that. Like, what's Pearl there for? Like, it's almost like they wanted to pay like some homage to like Jabba the Hutt or Pizza the Hutt. And then they create this Jabba the Vamp. I know they want Karen to have a chance to look kind of badass and show that she's a cool girl, but either way, it's gross, it's poor taste, and I think it's really shitty special effects.
Just a second ago, you said that you wanted vampire academics. Pearl is a vampire academic. Pearl is so much fun. He's like the vampire historian. It's his job to collect information for the council. He watches TV screens. He's looking at, I don't know, early iterations of the internet, it looks like. And that scene also gave us a hint that Karen doesn't just look badass. I thought it was also telling us she's becoming a little more sadistic, right? Like she's burning him for fun, and Blade looks over and he notices that. I thought it was a hint that her vampirism wasn't fully cured. It's like the first signs that we're seeing that she's vamping out.
Yeah, I totally didn't pick up on that. I didn't think about it that way. I thought it was more just like when Blade looks at her and says, "You're going to have to learn how to pull the trigger," that she took it literally with like the UV light.
With a flashlight.
Pull the trigger.
It is interesting, though, that he gives her a gun instead of just giving her the flashlight in the first place. Like, do you know how to use a gun? No, I'll learn very quickly. Do you know how to use a flashlight? Yes, of course, everybody does.
Then shine this way.
Later at the hideout, Blade injects himself with a special serum that suppresses his urge to drink blood. However, the serum is beginning to lose its effectiveness due to overuse. While experimenting with the anticoagulant EDTA as a possible replacement, Karen discovers that it explodes when combined with vampire blood. She manages to synthesize a vaccine that can cure the infected, but learns that it will not work on Blade. Frost and his men attack the hideout, infect Whistler, and abduct Karen. When Blade returns, he helps Whistler commit suicide. So when Blade cruises to his hideout, it's exactly what we've learned to expect from Batman, Darkman, Night Owl, the Ninja Turtles. Like basically, if you're going to operate in a city and you don't have $1 billion or you don't live with your aunt, you're going to need some abandoned industrial site as like your secret base. And in the 90s, I would totally believe this. Like Detroit would have this sort of place for Blade. But that much square footage with a gas pump and electric, that's going to get harder and harder to come by. And pretty soon, I think we're going to have superheroes operating like out of the suburbs. There's going to be no place like this for them to call home.
You know, it was the first thing I thought about when I was reading your notes was Daredevil. And the fact that the entirety of Daredevil's lore is built around like him being from Hell's Kitchen and him like, you know, fighting for Hell's Kitchen. And the time it was written, like it was like the Wild West out there, right? But now like Hell's Kitchen is completely gentrified and you'll have Daredevil, you know, being all, I'm going to protect the people of Hell's Kitchen. And like, he'll be like above like a Starbucks and across the street from like a Pinkberry. Kingpin is not coming there. But we get to this part of the movie and we get to what I think is a really affecting scene, which is Whistler's suicide. I am really excited about the new Blade that is coming out. I think Mahershala Ali is going to be a phenomenal Blade. But I do think that some of these mid-movie scenes, like in this section here, it shows why Wesley Snipes was such a good choice for him in the late 90s. And I think it's interesting on the pod for us to go from seeing a Wesley Snipes and White Men Can't Jump to this, because I think he's equally amazing as like the goofball in White Men Can't Jump and as like the serious vamp killer here. Because when Whistler's dying, and y'all, it's so affecting. I forgot that scene where like the white sheets laying over him and it's like covered in blood, and he looks away when he pulls it off because he doesn't know what he's going to see. And then Whistler starts talking to him. Wesley Snipes furrows his brow when he realizes that he's going to die, that he's going to kill himself. And you see the sadness consume him without any tears. And I'm really not overplaying it. If you think that this is like a ridiculous vamp movie, like go back and rewatch the scene, because Wesley Snipes is really, really good in it. And I remember as a teenager thinking this movie was cool as hell, but I didn't remember that Wesley Snipes was actually a really great actor in it. And before we move on, I just want to say R.I.P. Whistler. Like, Whistler was a badass. Like, Alfred fucking sucks in Batman. Alfred owes nothing to Whistler. Whistler's a lot better.
But I can't grasp his decision to commit suicide. Why would you? He tells Karen when she's, first bitten, hey, when you feel the thirst, take the gun and blow your head off. I could never do that. Why would I kill myself? I would explore all options. Maybe being an immortal vampire wouldn't be that bad. Whistler's got cancer, we assume, right? He is Blade's partner. Blade won't be able to continue the fight without Whistler. Why wouldn't Blade at least try to turn him? If he turned him, wouldn't that cure the cancer, bring him back, put them both on the serum?
I think in this version of the vampire tale, like all vampires are evil. So it's not just that they become immortal. They lose all morality. They become demonic, more intelligent, but equally malevolent zombies. And Blade is an outlier due to his ability to have morals, but he's different from what they are, right? But I think that Whistler's understanding is that once he changes, he's not Whistler anymore. He's evil.
Well, and don't forget, Blade is not a vampire. He's somebody who had his genetic code altered by vampire venom. Like, he's not a vamp. So Whistler can't just get those injections that Blade does and it be staved off. He's going to eventually turn into a vampire. And what does Chris Christopherson see? He sees what these vamps do. And can you imagine him like turning and then being in like leather pants with a spiky haircut, like next to Stephen Dorff? Like, he doesn't fit in there. That's not his world. Of course he kills himself. I think it's like the cool thing to do. Not that suicide is cool. I don't mean that. But like in this situation, like if he thinks he's going to turn and it's his worst nightmare, it's just the same thing. If you got bit by a zombie, Big D, in The Walking Dead, are you going to be like, hey, let's see how it turns out and see if brains really taste good? Or are you going to shoot yourself in the head?
That was before Gene's explanation. Because Gene's explanation, it tells me why Blade's mom didn't care about her son, because once she became a vampire, she became, consumed by the thirst. But hey, I'd still give it a chance.
She's also getting that dwarf dick, so.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
That silver coffin.
Coffin did look badass. Looked high tech.
Looks pretty badass in there. Looks soft.
I really liked it. Ash, earlier on, you hinted at like some of the rules, on what governs vampires in this world. So Blade gives us the full Vampire Anatomy 101. Crosses in holy water don't do dick. So forget what you've seen in the movie. He tells Karen. So vampires in this world are allergic to silver and garlic. It can cause them to go into anaphylactic shock and possibly death, depending on how much you give them. Maybe you shoot your spray in the mouth, they're going to die. Stake to the heart, kill them. Being exposed to sunlight will burn them and ultimately kill them. But here's my thing. Later in the movie, we see they've developed a new sunscreen. And if it's as simple as putting on like an SPF 2000, why wouldn't they do this all the time? Get some sunglasses, get some SPF on, long sleeve shirts, and you could be a daywalker.
You see Deacon, and he's not wearing sunglasses, and he's out in the sun. Does this sunblock protect their eyeballs? Does it protect their tongues? Like,
No.
Are they putting it inside their mouths? The sunscreen thing was absolutely unnecessary. And what bothered me the most about it was there was no key moment in the plot where they needed to be out in the daytime, right? So like when they do a raid on the headquarters, they could have done that at night. When Deacon stands off with Blade in the street and he's got the little girl in the park, could have done that at night. And even when they go to execute Dragonetti, like they could have chained him out there at night and then left, right? Like as the sun was coming up.
I did some research on this, and apparently in the comics, the whole thing with Frost, like the older you are as a vampire, the more susceptible to sunlight you are, the more it affects you. So Frost wasn't turned too long ago before he's here. And also, the more you exert yourself, the more you sweat, the more the sunlight affects you, which is why, like, because immediately I was like, okay, this doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, why wouldn't you just put sunscreen on all the time if you think Blade's coming? So he flashes the UV lamp at you and you're just like, I'm fine, right? But he can't do that because if he's fighting, if he's like whooshy, whooshy, whoosh, fighting him with the sword, then he's exerting himself. And so therefore the sun would affect him heavier. And fun fact, this is also the lore in True Blood, which is why some people in True Blood, like Bill, can run from the grave to rescue Sookie and not totally die.
So, Ash, on behalf of all of our listeners, I just want to thank you for your dedication. You are the pearl of this podcast.
Always.
You are the historian. You are the one who does the research. I've learned more.
It feels so much sarcasm right now.
I'm being serious. I'm being 100% serious. The shit you know about the history of the characters, it impresses me, and it is filling out my understanding. No sarcasm at all.
It does lead me to one missed opportunity where we could have gotten a like Buffy the Vampire Slayer spike scene where somebody was running with like a leather jacket over their head, just smoking across campus.
And blacking out like the front of their car with like one little hole while he's driving. Oh, I wish someone would commission all of Buffy. Pay us to do all of Buffy so that I can watch it with Jean. It's like my life's dream to watch Buffy with Jean Lyons.
Come on, Steve. When Blade attempts to rescue Karen from Frost's penthouse, he is shocked to find his still alive mother, who reveals that she came back the night she was attacked and was brought in by Frost, who appears and reveals himself as the vampire who bit her. Blade is then subdued and taken to the Temple of Eternal Night, where Frost plans to perform the summoning ritual for La Magra. Karen is thrown into a pit to be devoured by Dr. Webb, who is transformed into a decomposing zombie-like creature. But Karen injures Webb and escapes. So we've had a pretty good run here of movies with great villains. And I think everyone remembers Deacon Frost from Blade. He had that Hot Topic hair, the gorgeous shirts, that handsome boy bullying. But there's a guy that I forgot about, which is Quinn, his henchman. And he is every bit as good, if not better. This guy, he looks and acts like half of my motorcycling buddies. He's making jokes about losing his hands. My favorite scene is when they're in the Temple of Eternal Night and they're going down the elevator and he's just excited and singing his little song about becoming a naughty vampire god. This guy was an absolute pleasure and made the movie so much fun.
I completely agree. I think Quinn is fantastic. And I especially love the constant hand jokes and like where his hand gets cut off and then it's back, and the fact that like his makeup's constantly changing because he keeps getting hurt. I love they get set on fire in that first scene. Like, it's a great introduction to his character. But I want to talk about Frost for a second because I don't really know Steven Dorff from many other things other than the fact that he piloted like the blue vapes, which taste disgusting. And so I'm not really familiar with his work. And I loved him here. And I remember loving him when I saw it originally. But guys, I felt kind of seen and then felt really conflicted that I've not changed much since I was 14 because I was still really fucking attracted to Deacon Frost.
His shirts are impeccable. I mean, his outfits are just great. Built, nice and lithe. Like, I like that. How did you feel about the hair? Do you think it hurt him or helped him?
I think the hair definitely hurt him because it doesn't move correctly. Like, it's like he's like a member of like, what was that band that Ashley Simpson was with, that guy? Good Charlotte. He looked like a member of Good Charlotte throughout a lot of the movie, which I don't think is a good look, but you know, you could shave his head or just like wet it.
I think older Steven Dorff. I think he's pretty good. I think young, it's an inexperienced actor, but I in this role, I thought he was perfectly cast for it.
He was amazing. And I have to say, I also thought the fight scenes held up pretty well. So I'm going to go on a limb here because I've stopped saying fight scenes look good because Jean just like destroys my life. But I thought that Blade was an amazing fighter. He wasn't slow like in some movies. There's that scene where he's in the hallway with the two people that have like the vampire lightsabers and they're fighting him. And that scene's pretty fucking quick. Now, the blood bag special effects kind of ruin what leads up to it. But am I wrong, Jean? Like, are the fight scenes in this as good as I think they are?
No, you're not.
Woohoo.
They're really satisfying. But what's great about them is that they're self-aware in their showiness. Like they know that they're being like kung fu movie level of absurd in the action. The great scene where like Blade is inside of Karen's apartment and he's just smashing the cop into everything around him. And they're like, let's break a chair. Like, let's drop him through a table. Let's run him into the wall. And there's even a scene where Blade and an assailant, they're like trading high spin kicks. And you could see him laughing. Like he's laughing while he's doing it because he's having such a good time. And you talked about the blood bag special effects when he like injects the anticoagulant into the chicks' faces. I don't even think that ruined it. I think they were going for a feel with these effects, and big blasts of blood or inexplicable flames fit perfectly with it. The only complaints I had was during the final scene when the heads of the 12 vampire houses turned into like flying skeletons. Yeah. That was pretty bad. And that sword fight is probably the worst sword fight I've ever seen.
The wink and the nod. Snipes kind of looks at us and says, hey, Just go with it. Roll with me here. This is going to be good. And I found myself not questioning ridiculous things in the fight. I was more accepting and tolerant. Even that roundhouse kick at the end, when he hits the anticoagulant, I'm like, that's so risky. What if it goes into Blade's like ankle? Blade's dead. But because I had been conditioned, I had been groomed by the movie to accept these fight scenes, I was on board.
One other thing I want to complain about, if I may, is the Temple of Eternal Night. It didn't make any sense to me, right? They really got their money's worth for the computer animation. Somehow they take this ancient script from the gigantic Book of Erebus, they feed it into a computer, and it gives us this like 3D illustration of a ritual, which we then get to see about 100 times throughout the movie. But I'm left wondering, as we see this Temple of Eternal Night, did Frost already know where the Temple of Eternal Night was? Is it in Detroit? And it looks a little new to be ancient. Like it's got like metal and like electronics and technology going there. I'm totally confused by this temple.
I have such a huge problem with the fact that it's in Detroit, because if it's ancient, it would be like somewhere like in the Middle East. Like that would make sense to me, that they have to like go on a plane ride to the Middle East. I mean, it's the same issue I have with the idea of ancient things like ancient golden temples and Jesus coming to America. Like the other thing is that I would have pictured it more like when I read it in my head, I see it more like the end of like Cabin in the Woods, the big temple that they have there with the big giant portraits that fill with blood, like to appease all the gods. Because this is not just new, it's really fucking clean. And they've broken through, like there's all that construction work where it looks like they've broken through that one wall. You'd think they would have to, you know, go in there with their little hammers and their little brushes, like archaeologically, and clean it out, because it's pristine.
I also love that at the bottom of it, they're like, well, we got this pit. What would you do? I know. Let's take Dr. Webb, who we some reason kept with us, and let's put him down in the pit just so Karen has something to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Blade is drained of blood, but Karen allows him to drink from her, enabling him to recover. Frost completes the ritual and obtains the powers of La Magra. Blade confronts Frost after killing all of his minions, including his mother. During their fight, Blade injects Frost with all of the syringes, and the overdose of EDTA causes his body to inflate and explode, killing him. Karen offers to help Blade cure himself, but instead he asks her to create an improved version of the serum so he can continue his crusade against vampires. In a brief epilogue, Blade confronts a vampire in Moscow. We talked about how much we remembered of this movie, and I feel like I remembered pretty much everything. I remembered Blade being cool. I remembered Blade being tough. But I had totally forgotten over the years how funny he is. And I mean like laughing with him, not at him like Silverado, right? In the opening Bloodbath rave, we see him hold up his chakram like before he throws it and kills like 8 guys in one toss. And he grins right at the camera. I couldn't help but like roar and clap when I saw that. I love this guy, and he sticks with it throughout the movie. When he ends Deacon Frost in the final boss battle, as Big D says, he kicks that anticoagulant and he explodes like some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill. You can see those early beginnings of the MCU where it's dark, it's violent, but also it's funny in its own way.
He's almost got a little Deadpool sarcasm. he's not openly talking shit to people, but you can see he's a smartass, and that's not something we got from a superhero.
I am not usually a fan of remakes. I think they're really obnoxious. But I think what is exciting about this one coming is it's a chance to give like a true like Marvel take on Blade, because before the MCU really developed, everything were in these like little isolated pockets. And if you've not read the Blade comics, like he's not an isolated character at all. He doesn't just stay in his own world. Like he joins the Avengers at one point, like he fights with the X-Men at one point, and Deacon Frost is a bad guy that shows up in other comics. Blade at some point interacts with Spider-Man, and so I think it's really cool to introduce him in there. And I think it's about fucking time, because the MCU I love. There's a lot about the MCU that I really genuinely do like, because Marvel is far better than DC. But that being said, like the gothic characters of the Marvel universe, like they've gotten the short end of the stick, because you've got Daredevil, and then you've got, you know, Jessica Jones, who's super dark, and the Punisher is super dark, and you had that great moment on Netflix, but they haven't brought him into the films as much. And I think it's time for them, and it's time for Blade, and a little bit of gritty, little bit of darkness to balance out some of fucking Chris Pratt.
I think the shame here, though, is that Blade somehow came after Morbius.
Ugh.
Jared Leto, just stop. Stop making comic book movies, dude.
And music.
Morbius was a couple years old. I think they filmed it 3 years ago, and it's been delayed since pre-pandemic.
But it and Venom, though, are still acting in their own little world. Like they haven't been fully integrated yet. And Morbius is just such a dumb comic. I'm sorry for the fans out there, but it's pretty lame.
Both of you.
We're hitting a saturation point where it's every week there's a new show, a new character, they're tying in. There's going to come a point, just like zombie films and zombie shows, where people have had enough.
Not if things continue to come out like Moon Knight, which everyone out there should go watch. It's amazing.
I complained on the Titanic episode how they just went a little too far with the CGI. They went beyond their abilities. And I think here it could have been much worse. They originally, La Magra was just supposed to be like a whirlwind of blood. So Stephen Dorff would turn into like a blood whirlwind that Blade then has to fight. But how do you fight a whirlwind? They took a look at it. They're like, it doesn't look good. And that's why they dropped in that awful sword fight. So the sword fight was kind of added in last second. And I'll take a bad sword fight over Blade fighting a CGI blood whirlwind any day.
What? I mean, come on. What a great moment. I don't know how this isn't like a GIF that's used over and over again. It's him being cut in half and then being sucked back together again. It's fucking amazing.
All right. Now's the time of the podcast where we give our wipe score for Blade. Our wipe score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is the collar on a Deacon Frost shirt. Just that beautiful Hawes and Curtis tailoring. 5 wipes is an absolute disaster. It is Bloodbath. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your score for Blade?
This movie is so much fun, y'all. It's badass. Snipes is awesome. It does take itself a little seriously in certain parts, and I do think it runs a little bit long. And the special effects, as we've talked about, have diminished a little bit, but I don't care about any of that. It still really holds up. Blade is such an underappreciated comic book character. He's awesome. He's dynamic. He's well developed. He's interesting. He's dark. And I'm really genuinely excited after watching this to know that he's going to get a new life soon. I was feeling, I guess, a little like meh earlier because I watched Silverado and this back to back and then did my notes all at the same time. It was quite the interesting day. And so I was going to give it 1.5, but I think that that's unfair. After talking about it with you guys, like if I look at what my other scores are, I don't think that that is valid compared to how much I enjoyed it and the quality I think it is. So I'm going to back that shit up, but I'm going to call it a one wipe movie.
Nice. I'm with you on that one wipe, Ash. Marvel gave us a superhero movie in 1998. With a black Dompier protagonist, a kick-ass soundtrack, terrific action scenes, loads of laughs, a great villain and henchman, loads of style, and it still entertains me 23 years later. I had fun from beginning to end. I cared about the characters, and I would watch this movie anytime it's on. I'm sad that I haven't watched it more. It's one wipe for me.
You know what it reminds me of? I feel like it's this, like Hellraiser and Constantine are the 3 movies that are not like cinema movies for me, but just like you said, I watched them anytime they were on, and I forgot that Blade was in that trifecta. I thought it was just the first 2. Like, this is going to become a I can't sleep, I'm going to put it on kind of movie.
And now I'm horny.
Yeah, sure. That's like the highest compliment I can give it.
So I went back and looked at the scores I've given all of our vampire films, and the highest I'd given was Interview with the Vampire at 1. The worst I'd given was Bram Stoker's a 4. I think that this movie, Blade, is by far the best. It's fun. The action is great. It's entertaining. But I can't deny Interview with a Vampire was a compelling story. It's a good film. So I think this is on par. I can't say it's better. It's different, but I enjoy them both. This one's more fun though. So I'm going to go stay consistent with Interview with the Vampire. This is a one wipe movie for me.
Woohoo!
It's unanimous. One wipe for Blade.
That now ties us in the one wipe with Empire Strikes Back, Conan the Barbarian, Rounders, Back to the Future Part 2, Toy Story, Tremors, Sling Blade, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And just for people out there, if you're wondering, that now ranks this as number 2 on our vampire films. Number 1 was Interview with the Vampire with a 0.67. Number 2 is this film, Blade, with a 1 wipe. Then in the third spot is Dusk Till Dawn with a 2.17. Then there is Bram Stoker's Dracula with a 2.33. And last on our list, surprisingly, is Lost Boys with a 3.33.
Oh, that kills me.
Roger gave it a 4, so that
He's
kind of
an
ruined
ass. Fuck him. That's a great fucking movie.
Well, Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Well, Gene, coming up next week, a magical board game unleashes a world of adventure on siblings Peter and Judy. While exploring an old mansion, the youngsters find a curious jungle-themed game called Jumanji in the attic. When they start playing, they free Alan Parrish, who's been stuck in the game's inner world for decades. If they win Jumanji, the kids free Alan for good. But that means braving giant bugs, ill-mannered monkeys, and even stampeding rhinos. This again came from Steve, the commissioner of Hook. And this movie came out in 1995, and this is a great one. I have to admit, I watched the 2 new ones with Emma, and she loved them.
Yeah, my kids actually prefer this one to the new ones. The new ones are made for adults. This one's made for kids. So I think Gene's going to hate it.
I can guarantee I will.
Oh, I guarantee
you're going to hate it.
But that means we'll probably love it, Ash.
No, I mean, I don't know if I can say I love this movie.
I just can't wait for Steve's voicemail.
Hey guys, it's me again.
I forgot that we're doing this movie, Jumanji. I really don't.
Jumanji.
I really don't remember it, but I think it was good.
I haven't ever seen it.
I did it for Ash.
I think I used to like it the way I used to like you guys.
Yeah. Gonna go have some hot sauce now and work out.
Anyway, thanks, Steve, so much for the commission of this movie and the next. And thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can leave us a voicemail on our speak pipe at shatpod.com. Email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting the website, shatpod.com. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective starring Stephen Dorff, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all that information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever we find podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
There's a game called Jumanji that has a life all its own.
You have no idea what you are getting yourself into.
An ancient game where the primitive spirit of the jungle can leap out and take hold of your world.
I've seen things you can't even imagine. Things you can't even see.
And those who have ever played the game know the dangers that lie within.
You're afraid. It's okay to be afraid.
I am not afraid of anything.
Prove it.
presents Robin Williams. Jumanji. It's a jungle in there.